question: what is the distinction between the serpentine logic and the duality consciousness? Well, that's a very important question. Let's do a quick answer. The duality consciousness can be compared to quicksand. Once you fall in it, the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. But quicksand is kind of, what should we say, neutral. I mean, quicksand is just quicksand. It has no intention of pulling you down, so to speak. So the serpentine consciousness is a different state of consciousness that's aggressive. So we can say that the serpentine consciousness is created by beings who went into duality and went very deep into duality to the point where now they are aggressively seeking to get other people, number one, to go into duality, and number two, to stay in duality once they're in it. So we might say that there's a pool of quicksand, and those in the serpentine consciousness have put up a sign saying, safe passage. And once you go into the quicksand, they're trying to push you back down when you seek to get up. So that's a rough difference in the two. In other words, the duality consciousness is just a certain state of consciousness. But the serpentine mindset or the serpentine consciousness is an aggressive state of consciousness that wants you to go into duality and stay in duality. In order to achieve this, it uses, among other things, this what I've called serpentine logic. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look at the two, and let's start with duality. I have described it in many of my videos, how the world is created. I have one that's called How the World Was Created. And it's important, if you really want to understand this topic, you need to watch that video because it really goes into depth about this. So you have the bigger picture and you can put it all into. But to just focus on duality. We have free will. We were given free will. And I explained this in several videos, why we were given free will, because it's the only way we can grow. And the goal of our world of form is really that the world is an educational institution where we can start with a very localized, self-focused state of consciousness, and we can gradually transcend that sense of self until we reach the same level of consciousness as the Creator. So, as part of having free will, we need to be able to go into the duality consciousness in order to experience that. So what's so special about the duality consciousness? Well, okay, in order to really understand this, we need to step back a little bit and realize that our world of form is just one among many worlds of form that exist right now, that have existed before. So our world of form was created by one being. I call it the Creator. But this Creator didn't appear out of nowhere, and it didn't always exist. That's contrary to most religions on earth, but it's not the case that God was perfect from the beginning. Our Creator started out just as you and I. It started out in another world of form created by another Creator. It started out as a point-like sense of self, and it expanded that sense of self up through the layers of that other world of form until it reached the Creator consciousness. And because it has all of this experience with how to create a world that doesn't self-destruct, how to create self-aware extensions of itself that don't self-destruct, it defined our world of form. And as part of defining this world of form, the Creator decided that it wanted to give extensions of itself free will. It isn't something that has to be done, but this is basically what happens in most worlds of form, because the purpose of a world of form is really growth, self-transcendence. And without free will, there's no self-transcendence. So, the Creator knew that when you give beings free will, they have two states of consciousness, two basic states of consciousness they can be in. One is, as connected beings, as I explained in many of my videos, you're connected to your higher self and to the entire hierarchy of spiritual beings that reaches from your level to the Creator. So this is one, you are connected. The other is you can go into what I call the illusion of separation. And there is no actual state of separation, because everything is created out of the Creator's consciousness and being. So nothing can be separate from the Creator in this world of form. It just can't be done. I mean, it's like saying that a little handful of water in the ocean is separate from the ocean. You know, it's meaningless. So, but we can create the illusion in the mind. And why can we do this? Because what is self-transcendence? Self-transcendence is we have a certain self, and we are co-creating through that sense of self. We are getting experiences through that sense of self. And we do this until we've had enough of that sense of self, and then we say, now I want more. That means you then transcend your previous sense of self into a higher sense of self. That's self-transcendence. Okay, so what the Creator did when it gave us free will was that it first created the one mind. You can call it the one mind, you can call it the Christ mind, you can call it the Buddha nature, or the Krishna consciousness. It can be called many different names. It can even be a completely neutral name, like the one mind, or higher awareness. So it creates this one mind, and everything that has form is created out of that one mind. Which means that if you see beyond a certain form, you see there's the one mind within it. It's the same as you are looking at whatever device you are looking at this video on, whether it's your phone or TV or computer. There's a physical device. But if you look behind the outer form, it's made out of atoms and subatomic particles and energy waves. So in other words, whatever form could ever be created, the one mind is within it, behind it, and if you see beyond the form, you see the one mind. The reason why this is important is that this means that we can now exercise our free will. Because whatever we create, whatever experience, whatever sense of self, whatever experience we create with our free will is created out of the one mind. And that means we can always transcend that sense of self by reconnecting to the one mind. And this is important because, as I said, we have the two options, connected, separate. When we go into separation, we can technically become lost in separation. And I'll explain that in just a minute. So, but because all of the appearances, all of the sense of self that we create in separation is still created out of the one mind, the one mind gives us a way out. And this is the law of free will. It is, we have free will to create any sense of self, any experience that we can imagine. But we can never create a sense of self that we can't get out of. We can always transcend any separate self we have created by seeing beyond it, seeing that the one mind is within it, and reconnecting with that one mind. So in other words, we cannot use our free will to take away our free will, to limit our free will, to destroy our free will, to abort our free will. We can't make choices with our free will that will take away our ability to make choices, to make new choices, to make more aware choices. So we can choose to go into any sense of self, but we can choose to go out of it again, because whatever we create is out of the one mind. Right? So, and I know this is a subtle point, because I've seen it over the years, how many spiritual people don't get it. They don't get that there must be that one mind in order for us to really exercise our free will and not get trapped by our own choices. And I see even spiritual teachers who don't get it. I see some of these non-duality teachers that don't understand the importance of this. And that's often because they don't actually acknowledge free will. They don't acknowledge that the purpose of creation is our growth in self-awareness. And we do this by making choices. And really, it doesn't matter what choices we make. It's not like there's an angry God sitting in the sky watching every choice we make and say, oh, this is wrong, this is right. So we can go into duality, we can go into separation. There's no judgment from God about this. It's just a choice we are making, and the Creator knows that we can get out of that choice again when we've had enough of that experience. But the only reason we can get out of it again is that everything is created out of the one mind. And that's why we always have the choice to reconnect to the one mind. And it doesn't mean that we go instantly back to where we were. It just means that whatever sense of self we have right now, the one mind will show us, when we're open to it, the next step up. So I have in several videos explained that there are 144 levels of consciousness available to us on Earth. And that the neutral level is the 48th level, where we have a sense we are connected beings. Don't have a clear vision what we're connected to. We have a sense we are connected. When you go below the 48th level, you go into separation. And you can technically go to the lowest level that's possible on Earth. That's as far into separation as you can go on Earth. So if you, at the lowest level, connect to the Christ mind, it will show you the illusion that it corresponds to that level, because each level has a certain illusion corresponding to it. And then you can see that illusion by comparing it, because the Christ mind becomes or the one mind becomes your frame of reference. Then you can rise to the next level up. When you then again reach for the one mind, you can see the next illusion. You can keep rising until you reach the 48th level, then you're connected, but you still keep rising through the different levels. By always reaching, at each level you must reach for the Christ mind to show you the illusion so you can rise to the next level up. That's simply the process of growth, the process of returning to oneness. Okay, so this is important to understand, because now you can see that the two choices we have, two options we have, is connectedness. And how do you see yourself as being connected? Well, through the one mind. That means that you are consciously aware that the one mind is within you. In other words, you're not a separate being. You're not separated from the one mind. You are out of the one mind. And this is what gives you a sense of connection. When you go below the 48th level to the 47th level, you literally forget this. Your sense of self as a connected being dies in a spiritual sense. And you are reborn into a separate being where you see yourself as separate. That's because now you cannot see the Christ mind or the one mind in yourself. You don't experience it directly. You can have it as a theoretical concept, but you don't have the experience. Okay, so how do you then go into separation? You do this through the duality consciousness. And what is the duality consciousness? Well, let's first look at what is the one mind. The one mind is the one that connects everything. And it basically does it in a, we might say, vertical way. So, as I said, you are looking at whatever screen you're looking at this video at, but behind it is atoms. So you can have many different forms here in the world. You may look at an apple, you may look at an orange. They appear different. But if you look behind them, there's atoms. First there's molecules, then there's atoms, then there's elementary particles, then there's energy waves. So this is what I mean with a vertical way. So it's not like you are ever going to say that an orange is the same as an apple. They are distinct, but you don't see them as separate from each other or separate from the one mind. When you connect to the one mind, you can see that they are out of the one mind, even though they are still differentiation. It's not that everything becomes the same in the Christ mind or in the one mind. It's just you see that everything is out of the one mind. So when you go into separation, into duality, you use the duality consciousness, right? So in other words, when you're a connected being, you can sense that there's the one mind behind everything. When you go into separation, you lose that sense. Now you're only seeing everything as separate. An apple is absolutely different from an orange. And of course, there are many other distinctions. And the reason why you do this is that in duality, you are defining in your mind, you are defining what you think is real. When you are connected, you are seeing everything in the world, but you have the frame of reference of the one mind to compare everything to. Which means what? It means that your mind hasn't become a closed system. Your mind, you don't believe that you can define what's real and unreal, because you are experiencing, you are sensing there's something beyond your own mind that's the one mind that's greater than your mind. So your mind isn't self-sufficient, it isn't capable of defining what's real and unreal. Reality is the one mind. Everything in the world, it's not that it's necessarily unreal or false or a lie, but you just see that these are expressions of the one mind. In separation, you don't see this. And therefore, you are in a sense in the quicksand, where you are thinking, not consciously for most people, but you are thinking that your mind can define reality. But how do you do this? You do it by operating with this polarized system, where there are two extremes, and there are gradations in between. And there are many of these dualistic polarities. It can be fairly neutral, such as matter and energy, mind and matter. They're it's just a definition that you have created. There is mind, there's matter. Physical matter is this hard physical substance, and mind cannot directly affect physical matter, so therefore they're seen as separate. In the one mind, you see that everything is actually mind. Even physical matter is an expression of mind. But in the separate mind, you can't see this. So you can go deeper and deeper into separation, and at some point you cross a line where now it isn't just the neutral polarities. You're not just defining mind and matter, energy and mass. You are adding a value judgment. Good and bad, good and evil, right and wrong, true and false. And in a sense you could say the true and false is there from the start, because when you are connected to the one mind, there's really, true and false are kind of meaningless terms, because you experience that there is the one mind, and that is the ultimate reality. And therefore what you see in the world that has form, it's not ultimate reality because it's out of the one mind, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist and it isn't real and it isn't important, because it's important for giving you the experience. When you go into duality, you are caught between the two opposites right away. And so this means that you are now defining a certain sense of self, and you think it's real and it's true and it's the only right sense of self. When you're connected, you have a certain sense of self, but you realize there's more to it because you're connected to something beyond your sense of self. In separation, you're completely identified with your sense of self. And this is perfectly fine. This is part of what free will is meant to give you. We are actually, in order to really grow and in order to really ascend, we need to experiment with the duality consciousness, because we need to come to a point where we have had enough experiences of trying to define what's real and unreal in our own minds, that we see the limitations of this state of consciousness. We see that it can only create what the Buddha called suffering. In other words, the first noble truth, life is suffering. It's not that life is suffering, but life in a dualistic state of consciousness, in the separate state of consciousness, is suffering. Why? Because it's always two polarities. So you, for example, you adopt a certain worldview, and let's just make it practical. When I was 18 years old, I went to college, and for the first time in my life, I experienced these born-again Marxists that were true believers in Marxism. So they had adopted Marxism is the only true political philosophy. And obviously, many people didn't agree with that. They had the opposite, capitalism or whatever you call it. And so right there you had a tension or conflict between the two, and it's those kind of conflicts that create all human suffering. So the moment you go into separation and adopt this dualistic view of the world, you will suffer. So you simply have to have enough of these experiences, until you don't want to do it anymore. And then you can consciously choose to leave duality behind. But this really means you have to come to a point where you have now seen that trying to define what's real in my own mind as a separate mind is not what I want to do anymore. It got me nowhere. It just got me into suffering deeper and deeper layers. It's like the quicksand. The more you struggle to prove that you are right in a dualistic system, the more opposition you to create for yourself, the deeper you sink into the quicksand. Right? Okay, so again, no matter how deeply you sink into the quicksand, or how far you go below the 48th level, if you go to the very lowest level, the Christ mind, the one mind is still there, and you can get out of it. Now what the serpentine mind does, it tries to, first of all, it tries to get people to go into duality, but once you're in it, because most people on earth are already in it, it tries to keep them in it. And it tries to use this, it takes the dualistic arguments, but it gives them a twist where they become more aggressive. So what have I said here? Well, let's first step back again and look at duality. In duality, there are two opposite polarities, right? Capitalism, communism. If you focus on one and say, this is the ultimate one, you are creating a perception filter in your subconscious mind that filters out any arguments that go against your conclusion, and you magnify or see only the arguments that validate it. So your mind becomes a self-validating system. There are, of course, in any dualistic system, there are always at least two polarities. So communism had an opposite, capitalism. And you could find arguments that could allow you to get out of the communist camp. But the problem is, if you take these arguments against communism and look at those, you end up in the other dualistic polarity. Now you are capitalist, which of course is also an unbalanced system that allows an elite to exploit the population. Just like communism actually allows a different elite to exploit the population. But let's not get lost in all of this. So once you're in duality, you can look at arguments, and for a time you're going to take one dualistic polarity and you're going to look at the arguments that validate that. Then you may come to a point where you are tired of that. You begin to see that it's hollow, that there are some contradictions. Now you may be convinced about the other dualistic polarity is the right one. So people tend to flip back and forth. And after having done that for a time, some people start looking more for the middle. They look for some neutrality, some compromise between the two. But that's not there. You're still in duality. So you can go back and forth, or you can stay in the middle and go a little bit back and forth, but you're still in duality. So how do you get out of duality? By reconnecting to the one mind and realizing that there's a one mind that allows you to see that at your present level of consciousness, there's an illusion that keeps you at that level, and it is an illusion. And once you use the frame of reference on the one mind to see the illusion, you go to the next level up. Then you look for the next illusion, go to the next level up. And if you keep going like that, you go beyond the 48th level. And at the 48th level, your sense of self as a separate being dies, and you are reborn into a sense of self as a connected being. And then you can keep expanding that connection till you reach the 144th level, and now you can ascend from Earth. And that's the whole process. The whole purpose of the world of form is to help us go through that process, not only to ascend, because after the ascension we can still go through all these levels up to the greater consciousness. Okay, so back to this. The important thing to understand about the duality consciousness, and I see a number of these non-dual teachers who claim they have discovered the secret to non-duality. They haven't gotten this very, very point. The important thing about the duality consciousness is you cannot get out of it by reasoning within the system. You cannot get out of duality by using your own mind to reason based on the dualistic view. You need to have a frame of reference from outside duality, and there is only the one mind and beings who have united with the one mind, namely the ascended masters. It's the only way out of duality. It's simply, it's just the way the world is created, okay? It's like gravity, you know. There's no way out of gravity. And so the serpentine mind, the primary thing that the serpentine mind will do is it will get people to deny or doubt that you have access to the one mind. In other words, the serpentine mind will argue and reason and come up with this very subtle logic that once you're in duality, you don't have access to the Christ mind, to the alternative within your own mind. And it will do this in various ways. One aspect of this is to say, oh, we are purely material beings. You're not even a mind, because your consciousness, your mind, is an epiphenomenon of the physical brain. So everything you are, everything you think and believe, it's just the product of processes in your brain, physical brain. That's serpentine logic. There's nothing beyond the material universe. There's nothing to you beyond the brain. So therefore, you can never get out of your current state of consciousness. Another is that, oh yeah, there is an escape from suffering and duality. It's called heaven. But you can't get into it on your own. You need an outside savior, or an outside church, or an external guru. So, in other words, Jesus can save you, the Buddha can save you, Krishna can save you, or the Catholic Church can save you, or this or that guru can save you. It's not, and this does what? If you are focused on waiting for this outer savior to show up, or to follow all the dictates of a certain church, thinking you'll be saved after this lifetime, what are you doing? You are denying that you have access to the one mind inside yourself. And that's why you could look at it, and certainly I talked about true and false teachers before, but you can look at it that anyone who either denies or isn't telling you that you have access to the one mind in yourself is a false teacher, because they are using the serpentine logic to deny what is the basic design of the world we live in. Now, it's like trying to use logic to deny the force of gravity. And so the real teachers will say, yes, I have reached a higher state of consciousness where I have connected to the one mind. Therefore, you can use me as an example to be inspired that what one has done, all can do. This is the motto of the Ascended Masters. What one has done, all can do. If one person can attain a greater sense of connection and oneness to the one mind, all can do it. So a teacher may be able to help you reconnect to the one mind and increase your sense of connection. But a teacher can't do it for you, because you need to discover that the one mind is in you. That's the real purpose of the spiritual path, in a sense, the purpose of the entire world of form. And so the serpentine mind will deny this, and it will try to either deny it so you don't know about it, or it will try to make you doubt that you have access to the one mind in yourself, in all kinds of ways. You're not worthy, you're not good enough, who do you think you are? You think you're smarter than Jesus or the Buddha, or you're smarter than the church, authorities, or whatever. It will always try to create this wedge of doubt that it inserts into your consciousness. And it can be very aggressive, openly aggressive, or it can be very, very subtle. So, let's just look at one example. There are, of course, innumerable examples of this, but let's just look at one example. In the Catholic Church, you find the concept of original sin. This is entirely serpentine logic, serpentine mind. It denies almost everything I've said in this video, because it says that you were created as a sinner. But what I've explained is, you were not created as a sinner. You were created as an individual being. First of all, you were really created as your higher self, your I Am Presence, which resides in the lower spiritual realm. And it is not a sinner. It's not an imperfect being. It isn't an ascended being either. But it's not an imperfect being. Your conscious you, the core of your identity, is the conscious you, which is an extension of your higher self, sent into embodiment on this dense planet called Earth. Now, if we talk about sin, what does it mean? Well, if it has any meaning in the context that I'm giving here, we could say that once you go below the 48th level of consciousness, once you go into separation and duality, you could say that's a state of sin. But you were not created that way by God. And it was not mandated by God that you should go into this. It was a result of choices that you made. Now look at the Catholic doctrine. You were created as a sinner. You had no choice about it. God created you as a sinner. And therefore, God created you in this imperfect state from which you have to be saved. That's serpentine logic. In reality, you were created in a neutral state. You made choices. And you have now gone into separation. And yes, you need to be saved or raised out of that. That's correct. So, what did it take for the Catholic Church to really get people to believe in this doctrine of original sin? Well, one of the things they had to do was they had to get rid of the belief in reincarnation. In reality, many people at Jesus' time believed in reincarnation. The Pharisees, for example, they taught reincarnation. Jesus almost certainly traveled in the East. There are many indications of that, where he was exposed to reincarnation. He most likely talked to his disciples about reincarnation. But in order to make people believe that they were born into sin, and that they only had this one lifetime to be saved, or they would go to hell for all eternity, and in order to get people to obey the church blindly, they had to make them believe that this was it. You are created as a sinner, God created you as a sinner, and He's giving you this one lifetime to secure either your eternal salvation or your eternal damnation. And the reality is, of course, that you have had many previous lifetimes where you have made choices that took you into the maze of duality. And the way to get out of the maze of duality is to undo those choices consciously by connecting to the one mind within yourself. And this is not going to happen by being a member of a church, going to church every Sunday, confessing, lighting candles. It's not going to happen by you believing in doctrines. It's going to happen by looking at yourself, the beam in your own eye, as Jesus said. But look at the subtlety. If you say, in this lifetime, I was in the state of duality when I was born, then in a sense the serpentine logic is correct. You were born as a sinner in this lifetime, but not in the beginning of your existence, right? Now look at what the serpentine logic also says. The only way to escape this original sin is to obey the outer church, or in the Protestant religions, the grace of God, the Savior, Jesus as the Savior. Are they completely wrong? Yeah, you can debate that because, as I've said, you can't, within your own mind, once you're in duality, you can't reason your way out of duality. But you can by connecting to the one mind. And it can, in the beginning, be very helpful to see the one mind in a teacher. But ultimately, you need to come to see the one mind in yourself. So, but you see, the one mind is not part of your separate self. It's the alternative to it. So, once you're in separation, your separate self can't save you from the state of sin. Only the one mind can, but the one mind isn't going to do it for you. It's going to do it by offering you a frame of reference so you can come to see through each of the illusions that took you into separation, each of these dualistic illusions. So you see how the serpentine mind, it takes a valid enough concept, but it gives it a twist, so now it becomes false. It actually takes you in the wrong direction. And so you could say, do you need Christ in order to be saved? Yeah, you need the one mind. But is it going to come through a church? No. Is it going to come through a guru? No. Is it going to come by Jesus appearing in the sky and saving you? No. It's only going to come from within. And so what the serpents have done is they have done everything they can to undermine your ability or your willingness or your awareness that you can contact the one mind in yourself. Why? Because they want you to follow them and follow them blindly, and to continue to follow them blindly. This is what I call the fallen beings, and I've explained in my video about how the world was created and other videos in that playlist, what the fallen beings are and what they do. I'm not going to go into that here, it will be too much. So you see how, again, we have the duality consciousness. And in the duality consciousness, there are all kinds of arguments. I mean, you can find videos on YouTube where they have interviewed Trump supporters. And no matter what the interviewer says, no matter what questions he asks, these people will say, oh, I believe in Trump. I always believe in Trump. So you can see here, it's not a matter of the arguments themselves. And that's why I'm saying in the duality consciousness, there's no ultimate argument. You can't argue your way out of it. You just sink deeper and deeper into the quicksand. Because what is it that the duality consciousness does? You see these people who are Trump supporters. They are essentially believing that they can define in their minds what's real and unreal. Trump is the savior of America. Then you can go to some, those who oppose Trump. Trump is the one who's going to destroy American democracy. So you have two opposing viewpoints here. And both of them are convinced that they're right. And both of them have certain arguments they look at. Right? So the one in one camp, they are looking at the arguments for their viewpoint, and they are discounting or arguing against, invalidating the arguments against their viewpoint. And the ones in the other camp do the same, just the opposite. So That's why I'm saying, in duality, no way out. But you can connect to the one mind, and that's your way out. Because in the one mind, you see that whatever arguments that come up in duality, they're not real. They're not ultimate. You think in duality they're ultimate, but in the Christ mind allows you to see that a dualistic argument wasn't ultimate. There's actually something outside of duality, and that's what's real. So this is just free will, right? We can go into duality, we can get this experience that our minds are so sophisticated it can define what's real and unreal until we had enough of that experience, and then we reconnect to the one mind, go out of it. But the serpentine minds adds this layer of complexity that they are these fallen beings who are aggressively and deliberately seeking to undermine our ability to reconnect to the one mind, so that we are trapped in duality and will follow them blindly. Instead of, we might say, following Christ, we follow the fallen beings. We follow those who are in the state of Antichrist. And, Jesus talked about the blind leading the blind leaders, and that's what they are. Because even though the fallen beings are using the serpentine logic in a very sophisticated way, they're still in duality. They're still blinded. But they're absolutely convinced that they have the ability, and it's even beyond the ability of the one mind, it's even beyond the ability of God to define what's real and unreal. They think they know better than God what's real and unreal. And that is exactly what they are allowed to have that experience in duality and separation. And they are allowed to have it until they've had enough of it within certain boundaries. But at least until their higher self has had enough of it. And so you see how, what Jesus said is, he who's willing to lose his life for my sake. In other words, are you willing to lose the life you have as a separate being where you think you know what's real and unreal in order to reconnect to Christ, to the one mind? Because only then will you attain eternal life. Now, I say that you're allowed to be in duality for as long as you want until you've had enough of that experience, but there is, of course, no eternal life in duality. Everything has a limitation. So there does come a point where the sand in the hourglass runs out and your higher self will withdraw the conscious you. But there can be quite a lot of leeway there. And so what else can be said? Many things can be said, of course, about the subtlety of the serpentine mind. But the basic idea is this, in duality, in separation, you think your mind can define what's real and unreal. By connecting to the one mind, you have a direct frame of reference where you can see that your dualistic arguments, your dualistic sense of self, this is not ultimately real. The one mind is more real than anything the dualistic mind can come up with. But the serpentine mind seeks to undermine that ability, seeks to make you deny it. The serpents, you see, they can't stop you. They have no power to shut out the Christ mind from this world because everything is made out of the Christ mind. It's like saying you could preserve all of the physical forms on earth but get rid of atoms. Meaningless, nonsensical. So they can't do it, but they can do it in your mind, make you deny that you have access to the one mind within yourself. That's what they can do, and that's what they're always trying to do in a lot of clever, subtle ways. You can, once you grasp this one thing, you can start looking at religions, philosophies, scientific materialism, and you can see how many of these thought systems in the world are denying this very one thing, that you have access to something inside yourself, that you, little you have access to something inside yourself that can show you what's real and unreal. Just look at how we all put up to only the experts can know what's real and unreal. Only the church authorities can tell you how to be saved. Only the scientific materialists can tell you that all religion and spirituality is superstition and nonsense. Because they can tell you that your mind is just a product of the brain. Just look at how much of this there is. And then realize that the spiritual path is about you becoming self-sufficient, independent of any authority in the outer world. Now, it may be very inspirational for a time to follow a person who has a higher level of connection to the one mind than you do. That's perfectly fine. If the person really has a connection to the one mind and isn't just using the serpentine mind to make itself appear very advanced. Because this is again a way to look at false teachers and true teachers. False teachers can use the serpentine mind, and it's very, very sophisticated and very subtle. And they can use it to create this impression that they know, they are so advanced, they are the incarnation of this or that divine being, or they have reached this ultimate state of enlightenment, or they have authority from some higher source or whatever. So they can create this impression that you should follow them because you can't know in yourself. And it may be true for a time. This is again the serpentine logic, it's very subtle. It may be true for a time that you don't have enough connection to the Christ mind, and therefore you need to have an example. But see, the false teachers who are using the serpentine mind, they are not connected to the one mind. They have just learned to use the serpentine mind to create an impression that they are. But if you have a person who's genuinely connected to the one mind, then that person can be a great inspiration and can truly help you grow on the path. But no matter how, if it is a genuine teacher, there's come a point where the teacher points out to you that what you see in the teacher, you need to come to see in yourself. So you need to come to see that the one mind is in you. And therefore, in a sense, a true teacher, the goal of a true teacher is to bring you to a point where you have such a strong connection to the one mind, you don't need to teach anymore. You can still maybe benefit from interaction with you, but you realize you don't need an outer teacher because the one mind is inside of you. And of course, what I'm telling you here, it's not that I came up with this. It's not that this is the first time this has been said. This has been said innumerable times over the ages in many different ways. Jesus said it in a veiled form. He said it in a more direct form to his disciples. The Buddha said it. Other teachers have said the same thing. And so the serpentine mind knows all of this, and it's trying to deliberately undermine it by coming up with various clever arguments. And one of the ways it does it is that whenever there's a teacher or a person who demonstrates a certain degree of oneness with the one mind, the serpentine mind will try to idolize that teacher and say, oh, but he was so special. And I continually see this out there. I guess you could say it's one of these phenomenons that we have to deal with on the spiritual path. We have to deal with the concept of an external guru. And maybe it's part of the process that for a time we go into this idolatry of a particular guru. But I've just seen it in the 48 years I've been on the path, and I see it continuously, how you can find any number of organizations out there where they have a guru that they idolize. Oh, he or she is so special because of ... But the very argument that a particular guru is special undermines the reality that the Christ mind, the one mind, is in everyone. And therefore, it springs from the serpentine mind. It's the same as, as I've said in my videos about non-duality. Going into duality is what causes suffering. And what causes us to, or what makes us trapped in duality, is that we have a separate self. Absolutely correct that we have to transcend the separate self in order to get out of suffering. But the serpentine mind now takes this and says, the cause of suffering is the separate self. Therefore, you need to get into a state of no self, where you have no self, because if you have no self, there's no suffering. But see, first of all, it's duality, but second of all, it's causing you to deny that you have a real self, the individual self, the conscious you and the higher self in the spiritual realm, and that this self was created as a co-creator with the creator for the purpose of transcending itself with self until it reaches the creator consciousness. So the serpentine mind takes a valid idea, you have to overcome the separate self, and perverts it by saying that means you have to overcome all sense of self so that you no longer exist, and when you don't exist you won't suffer. But see, the purpose of existence wasn't that you go into separation and suffer and then you disappear after that. No, the purpose of existence was you experiment with your free will until you learn voluntarily and consciously to choose only to use it in connection with the one mind, and then you don't suffer by the choices you make. When you're connected to the one mind, your life is not suffering. Life is continued self-transcendence, and it's a joy, it's exciting. It's just a wonderful process to be part of our Creator's world of form, our Creator's process of self-transcendence. But you see, again, the serpentine mind can take valid ideas, give them a little bit of a twist, and then the outcome is you're just deeper into the quicksand. Because now you think there's nothing real to you. And it's just, it's almost endless. I mean, if I made a video every day for the rest of my life, I couldn't expose all of the lies created by the serpentine mind. But it doesn't matter, because once you realize the dynamic, and once you have some genuine experience of the one mind, and as I said, the separate self is something that the conscious you has taken on. And normally you are looking at the world, or you're looking at yourself from inside that perception filter. But the conscious you can never lose the ability to, even for a moment, step outside of the separate self and experience that you are not that separate self, you are more than that. And once you've had that experience, you have the frame of reference. And it doesn't mean you can see through all of the serpentine lies all at once. But you can see through the one lie that keeps you trapped at your current level of consciousness. And that's all you need to do. Then when you see that lie consciously, you rise to the next level. And then you can again connect to the one mind, see the next lie, rise to the next level. That is the process of spiritual growth. And those who seek to pervert it, they're using the serpentine mind, even if you say that, oh, you should have instant enlightenment. It's still the serpentine mind, because it doesn't work that way. You go into separation by making choices. It's like I've said before, there's a maze. The duality consciousness is like a maze. Once you're in it, you can't see out. Right? You only see these little twists and turns. So for every time you turn in the maze, you're making a decision to accept a certain dualistic illusion. It takes you deeper into the maze. You make another decision, go deeper. And the only way to get out, once you've gotten in there, is to retrace your steps, look at every illusion, see the unreality of it, then you take a step back, and another step, until you're back at the exit, and now you can exit the maze and say, okay, I've had enough of this seeking to define reality with my own mind by using the duality consciousness. And I've had enough of the serpentine consciousness as well. So I hope this helps you see the difference and actually get a new perspective on what spiritual growth is about.